So what is the hardest part about building a business as an entrepreneur? I think, likely the hardest part is just keeping your sanity and, not having a psychological meltdown, and that the pressure is really, really intense, in that you start out by convincing all of the best people you know to join you in the effort, and they're all depending on you. You raise money from all the people who believe in you, and then you put all your time into it. And so when you're doing that set of things, if things go wrong, you're going to lose everybody that you respect as an employee. You're going to lose everybody who believes in you as an investor. And then you generally have no friends, because all your life is on the company. So your whole life is sort of at stake in these things, and that can put like an excessive amount of pressure on you. You're kind of all in. So that's probably the most difficult thing. Yeah, what's the hardest stage of building a company? It really depends when things go wrong. So generally it's easy until you get into market. So it's pretty, coming up with the idea and developing the first product is, tends to be, in some ways the funnest time and the most enjoyable part of the process. Once you start having to make that into a business, that's when things generally go wrong. Depending on the business and depending on when things go wrong, the time of when it's hard can vary. What was the hard thing in my career? Well, there were a lot of very difficult times, I would say, but one of the most difficult times was when we had to take the company public. So we became a public company at Loud Cloud when the company was 18 months old. And according to our S1, we had $2 million in trailing 9 months revenue. So the business wasn't that very big. We were going from 2 million to 75 million year over year. But we weren't going public because we wanted to. We were going public because we had to. And in going public, when we were on the road to go public, and it wasn't clear at all that we would be able to raise the money with that kind of company at that kind of age, my wife became very, very ill, and I was basically got a phone call, and I had to make a choice between going home and making sure she was okay, and the company for sure 100% collapsing, or continuing with the IPO roadshow and trying to raise the money. She told me, stay on the road, go raise the money. But that was probably the hardest moment at least the hardest moment that I remember. I blacked out the other moments that were worse than that. But well, now my job is fun now. So now that I've been through the hard things, and I can just talk about them. But it's great. It's wonderful to be in the technology industry. With young people really trying to improve the world and come up with great new ideas and do something larger than themselves, and it's just great to be a part of all that. Yeah, well, it's deceptive to figure out what's a good idea and what's a bad idea, because the truth is the best ideas look like bad ideas at the time. So an idea that looks great now, like the telephone, was ridiculed when it came out. People thought, like, why would you want such a low-quality conversation that was very difficult to hear when you can send a telegram, which is error-corrected and perfectly accurate every time? It's like an insane prospect. Or more recently, something like Facebook was a social network for Harvard students. It's hard to imagine going after a smaller market than Harvard students. Good ideas look like bad ideas at the time that they come to market, and it's only in retrospect that people go, oh, that was a great idea. Well, you have to understand the secret that the entrepreneur has. Like, why does the entrepreneur believe this idea that's seemingly silly is really outstanding? Yeah, that's a great question. What are the most important qualities for an entrepreneur? So I think there's really three things that we look for. One is somebody who has a secret that they've earned. So they know something about the world that nobody else understands yet, and they learned that secret the hard way. They didn't just kind of sit brainstorming business models, but they did some hard work, either in computer science or in life trying to do something and realized that it was broken and figured out a way to solve it. That's probably the most essential characteristic. And then, beyond that, it's great if they themselves have the leadership skills to build a company, or the leadership kind of ability to build a company. And then thirdly, do they have the courage to survive the process of creating something from nothing? Well, I'm excited about a lot of ideas. One that's been in the news a lot with a lot of, where people have been dismissing it is cryptocurrency or Bitcoin. And it's funny, you read now about, oh my gosh, the price of Bitcoin is low. It's only $200 a Bitcoin, which is quite an amazing price for a currency created out of thin air in one way. But they're like, oh, cryptocurrency is over, like it was a bad idea, it'll never work. But it's really remains quite an important fundamental computer science breakthrough, which is the accumulation of really 40 years of work in cryptography and peer-to-peer networking, and solves the, in the computer science terms, the Byzantine generals problem, but kind of in more layman's terms, the double spending problem, which makes, for the first time, a way to transfer, not copy, but transfer a piece of digital property from one person to another. And the implications of this are really profound in terms of, everything from how you trade stocks to how you execute contracts to micropayments. And we think, I'm certainly very excited about the prospects for it over a long period of time, 20, 30, 40 years. But the price of Bitcoin continues to go up and down, and people will say, oh, it's ridiculous, it's deflationary, and whatever other kind of economic issues it may have. That's a great question. Are there ethical questions that come into play in backing a new technology? And I would say, the technologies tend to be kind of neither inherently good nor bad for the most part, at least the ones that we back. We're not backing any kind of nuclear weapons or things of that nature at this point. But they all have, even biotechnology and some of the more advanced techniques. You could, in the same technique where that you might use to engineer a cure for cancer, might be a way to engineer a deadly virus. But the technology itself, tends not to be inherently good or bad. We certainly won't fund somebody who had a bad intent, but we never see those really. So it really is a question of, once the company starts going, what kinds of decisions do they make and how do they think about that? And I think that we like to fund people who want to be in business for a very, very long time. And so we always encourage, the companies to make good ethical decisions along the way. And a great example of that is we funded a company called Airbnb, and very early on, an Airbnb is not it's a good intent technology. It's a way to share your residence and make extra money and be a good host and all these kinds of things. But certainly people used it for bad purposes in the early days. There was an incident where a meth addict rented out somebody's house and did not treat it well and so forth. And so then how do you address that? Like, how do you deal with that at Airbnb? And in theory, they could have said, look, we're just the broker of the transaction. We're not responsible. You elected to rent your house, and that's on you. I think they did, but we encourage them to say, look, it's important that you really care about the safety of the service and the well-being of all the customers of Airbnb. And to their credit, that's exactly what they wanted to do, and they put together a really, quite a good insurance program, but also put a huge focus on safety and building knowledge about all their clients and making sure that if you rent your residence, that you're renting it to somebody that is trustworthy. Yeah, so the DLD theme, only the beginning. What is it the beginning of? Well, I do think we're really at the beginning of a very, very big growth cycle in technology. So, starting with everybody has a supercomputer in their pocket. Not everybody, but 3 billion people, which, and it's going, quickly to the entire world's population. And there's just never been a computing platform like that. You've never been able to reach 3 billion people with anything for any reason. And so that opens the world in a way that's quite unique, in that as an entrepreneur, you know, we say something around the firm, which is like, you know, nobody's going to want to do this. You know, when people say no, nobody's going to want that, that could mean like 100 million people will want it, which, you know, used to be everybody in the old world. And so it really is quite an exciting time, and a time of, you know, great innovation, and where, you know, it's amazing to see young people come and say, wow, I don't understand why the world works like this, because I was born with a supercomputer in my pocket, and like, why would you do it that way if you had a supercomputer in your pocket? And that ranges from everything from how banking works, to how transportation works, to how, you know, how people live and what they do. And so that many people, you know, coming with so many great new ideas on a platform, and on the platforms that we have with cloud computing and mobile computing, is really amazing. And I am, for one, looking forward to the rest, since we are at the beginning.